decisions, and milestones. Plus all the convenience of our mobile app, where you can manage your account, deposit checks remotely, send money to family and friends, even turn your card off if it gets misplaced, then back on when you find it. Ready to bank locally with the team at Tompkins? Visit Tompkins Vist Bank online or at a branch to get started. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Everyone knows evil always lurks in the basement. Just imagine what or who you'll find inside a 125-year-old factory basement. Home to Fright Factory. Fright Factory brings high scares and high screams to its themed 25,000 square foot basement. Buy your tickets now at frightfactoryphilly.com. Skip the line and face the terror head on. We'll be waiting for you. Rain or shine in South Philly at 2200 Swanson Street. Fright Factory.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. I have my mask off as I was asked to do. I'm speaking closer to the microphone. Good evening. My name is Dennis Fisher. I'm the Vice Chair of the Township, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 13th Board of Supervisors meeting for Newtown Township. Before we go to our moment of silence, I'd just like to relate an incident that happened to me yesterday as I was driving through Village of Newtown and the four-way stops. And I had, at each of the four-way stops, I had someone motioning me through, and at the same time, simultaneously, I was motioning them through. And it was a nice interaction because after we exchanged waves twice, we both smiled at each other, and they went ahead and waved to me. So, and it was both encounters. So it was just nice to have that happen. It's better than the alternative that we often get with a fist or something else raised. So again, think about a moment of silence. Just think of being kind and encouraging to one another. And certainly there's a lot to have disagreements about, but let's try to be agreeable about our disagreement. Other than that, I would just ask you to, as I know Mr. Calabro was fond of saying, be kind to your waiters and waitresses and service people, and be sure to say thank you, and don't forget to tip. So Mr. Calabro is not with us again this evening. He's still recuperating, and he hopes to be with us soon. With that, I just ask us to have a moment of silence. Thank you. Could you join me in standing and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Manager, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any special actions? I see none. That would lead us right to our first round of public comment. If you have comments to share, please come to the microphone. Speak closely into the microphone so everyone can hear you, and let us know where your residence is located.
I guess I'll take this off, so follow your lead. My name is Frank McCarron. My address is 42 Rittenhouse Circle in Newtown. I would like to follow up on my comments about the process being followed in the Toll Brothers matter, so I can set the stage for recommendations that I would like for you to consider. In August of 2020, the Board of Supervisors voted 5-0 to deny Toll Brothers' conditional use application. How did it come to pass that shortly after that denial, the board was drawn into settlement discussions involving Municipal Drive when Municipal Drive had never before been mentioned? If you could turn back the clock, would you really be comfortable with the idea that residents would first hear about Municipal Drive in a letter from Toll Brothers close to a year later? And by asking Toll Brothers to send a letter to residents rather than the board discussing this as a public agenda item, does it really surprise you that residents of Delancey Court are alarmed that perhaps all this time there has been a deliberate effort to keep the discussion of Municipal Drive out of the public eye? Our alarm is further compounded by the question of how did we get a year down the road without any mention in the minutes about the Toll Brothers litigation. There is a requirement established by case law that when supervisors want to discuss litigation in executive session, they are supposed to give a detailed explanation to the public about what litigation is being discussed so the residents can understand why their rights to participate are being denied to them. I found several references in the 2020 minutes to Arcadia being discussed in executive session and a lot of discussion around Arcadia. I found a reference to an executive session to discuss litigation with Durham Partners Group for a medical office building and daycare. However, I found nothing about an executive session to discuss the Toll Brothers litigation. So why would we not conclude that the disclosure of Toll Brothers was treated differently than these other matters? This all opens you up to criticism that you were purposely trying to keep the residents of Delancey Court unaware of this Municipal Drive alternative until the very last minute, with the hope that by the time opposition appeared, we wouldn't get our act together fast enough to stop it. And for this proposal to be so clearly using key township assets, I personally don't understand how your solicitor believes you haven't deliberated in this matter. And not only was the letter I received from Toll Brothers one-sided, but the mailing itself was deficient, as it was sent to only 33 of the 120 homes in Delancey Court, all of whom were affected. I thought it audacious that your solicitor said at the last board meeting that the fact that we appeared before you during a portion of the meeting reserved for matters where you will not answer us means to him that the Toll Brothers letter was timely and sufficient notice, and is just more evidence that the process has gone awry. And our alarm turns to cynicism because, unlike Newtown Grant, this proposal was drafted before any residents within Delancey Court had a say. Thus, the board is viewed with suspicion, and that our say seems to be just a formality, since you seem intent to bring this proposal to a vote. Here is the $64 question on the minds of my neighbors. Who decided to bypass North Drive in favor of Municipal Drive? And to us, that means talking about the elephant in the room, the conflict of interest in the selection of the entrance to this proposed development. At the last meeting, Mr. Sanders said that individual supervisors could talk to whomever they wanted about this proposed development, even Toll Brothers, with the inference that that could be done without any duty to let the public, or for that matter, other supervisors know about it. So even if a supervisor was working behind the scenes to make sure that Municipal Drive was part of the settlement proposal, that seems to be okay. Based on what your solicitor said at the last meeting, it appears that an individual supervisor could talk to whomever he wanted, including Toll Brothers or township employees, to develop this idea of using Municipal Drive, discuss this idea one-on-one with other supervisors with no obligation to discuss it as a group, bring it to Toll Brothers and ask them to include it in their proposal, have the solicitor then present the idea as coming from Toll Brothers so it can be discussed in executive session. And to keep all mention of this out of the minutes, the solicitor could instruct the group of supervisors not to deliberate, or in layman's term, not to say what you think about the idea of using Municipal Drive in front of the other supervisors. Instead, this could be done all one-on-one. So while there may have been a legal footing, that does not mean it was the appropriate path forward. Compliance with the law is the minimum threshold that should have been followed. I would encourage the Board of Supervisors to take an introspective look at how, when, and why we got here. But you have an opportunity to turn a new page. Now that Toll Brothers has disclosed its view of the settlement proposal, why not make this matter a public agenda item so that we may know your view? There is no requirement to meet in an executive session. It's optional, and at this point, there is no purpose to maintaining a veil of confidentiality. If the supervisors were willing to discuss the selection of the entrance to this community in public, that would allow residents of Delancey Court, Newtown Grant, and Twining Bridge to all weigh in with their opinions. But perhaps more importantly, all township residents should have a say about the idea of allowing Toll Brothers to build an access road through the middle of township-owned land that is part of the municipal complex, rather than reserve this land for future expansion. At the last Board of Supervisors meeting, Mr. Fisher, he made a baseball analogy and said we are only in the fourth inning of a 9-inning game. Here's the problem. Baseball games are supposed to be played in front of fans, and under the Sunshine Law, the residents of this township are the fans. The stadium for this game is supposed to be a public meeting room, not behind closed doors. We may be in the fourth inning of a 9-inning game, but not only were the fans not allowed into the stadium, the fans didn't even know there was a game being played. And some residents feel that we are not fans, but that we are players who deserve to be on the field with you. We are here standing with you against Toll Brothers. So here is what I would ask that you do. With the good of the town in mind, tell the attorney for Toll Brothers and tell the judge overseeing the lawsuit that you're putting negotiations on hold until you can have public meetings to discuss whether using municipal land in this manner is appropriate. If after public deliberation you conclude it is, then you can also have a public meeting to discuss the pros and cons of the 3 possible entrances to this community. And then I just want to follow up on 2 other matters. I want you to know that I submitted a right-to-know request on September 13th for all of the documents referenced by Mr. Edelman and the site plan incorporated into his August 28th letter. However, I received a response that my request was under attorney review, and I won't have an answer to whether my request will be honored until October 20th. Another right-to-know request that I submitted was denied. Mr. Sanders said at the last meeting that there were board minutes instructing Toll Brothers to send out the August letter to nearby residents. I am now told such minutes do not exist. I would like you to honor my remaining right-to-know request. Otherwise, again, it gives the impression that the process is being run in a way to keep this settlement from becoming a matter for public examination until the very last moment. Lastly, I would like to discuss the wisdom of asking us to send comments to Greg LaGreca at Toll Brothers. As requested by Mr. Edelman, I sent comments and questions to Greg LaGreca on September 6th, with one follow-up question on September 14th. I received a reply from Mr. LaGreca on September 14th that said, Mr. McCarron, thank you for your emails. We are currently compiling a response and should have it to you next week. 10 days later, on September 24th, I followed up with Mr. LaGreca, and he replied, Frank, thank you for your email. We continue to compile and investigate neighbor responses, hoping for something next week or shortly thereafter. We are now into the thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a comment, if you don't mind. Perhaps Mr. Sander could tell us what the legal requirement is when you have an executive session. As I recall, we're not even supposed to mention what specifically was discussed, and I don't know how I know it has happened in the past where you have mentioned that we had an executive session to discuss Arcadia, and that's why it's in the minutes. But what is the law actually about the confidentiality of executive sessions?
Well, what is said at an executive session is confidential. There is a requirement based on relatively recent case law that when an executive session is announced in public that one was held, that you must provide the topic of that discussion. So when Mr. Calabro generally is the one who announces that we held executive session, they are generally announced as executive sessions to discuss matters of litigation regarding Arcadia, regarding toll, regarding whatever the item of litigation happens to be, or collective bargaining, police contracts, personnel, staff personnel, et cetera.
Right, so we had about, I think, 2 executive sessions relating to toll. I think one going back to January 2020. Was there any mention at a public meeting that we had that executive session to discuss a Toll Brothers settlement?
I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Mayor.
If Mr. McCarron is right, there wasn't anything in the record about that.
I don't know.
Yeah. Let me give you an example of what was said in a meeting. This was Monday, June 15th, 2020. And it said, executive session. Mr. Sanders said he will be looking for availability for an executive session later this week to discuss matters of litigation related to the proposed settlement of the Durham Partners Group for a medical office building and daycare. So this case, Reading Eagle, that's pretty much what they're looking for.
The other thing I wanted to mention about what you were talking about, a public meeting, I think we also discussed having a public meeting, like a work session, where toll representatives would come in, residents would come in, and we would discuss this in an open public meeting. But this meeting is being delayed because they wanted toll to submit something to do with that traffic light. Can you tell us what's going on with that proposal and, when we can have this public meeting that Mr. McCarron would like to have?
We can have this public meeting anytime the majority of the Board of Supervisors decides that it wants to have a public meeting or a work session, or it can be done in an executive session where the board has the right to invite anyone it wishes to invite to an executive session, or a combination of the two.
Well, okay, so we were told that the work session would have to wait until this traffic report was submitted to Penndot and Penndot made a response. So that's not true.
Well, it's not true.
We don't have to wait for that.
Correct.
Is what you just said.
Correct. We just thought it would make sense that we have the most possible data and information. So instead of having a meeting with open questions about whether that intersection is warranted for a traffic signal or whether other intersections are possibly better accesses for that development. So, why have a meeting when there's still unanswered questions? We're trying to get as much information as we can before we hold that meeting. But this board has the ability to schedule any kind of special meeting at once if you have a majority vote.
And so that means a motion would have to be made, correct? Correct. All right. Well, I'll have to talk to my fellow supervisors one-on-one to see what they think.
I just want to clarify, because make sure we're on the same page. What was talked about last week was a meeting with Toll Brothers and Township officials, Toll Brothers Township officials and residents of Delancey Court about this municipal drive proposal. What I'm proposing is a township meeting open to residents that will talk about all 3 potential entrances to this community. My view, and I said this at the last meeting, is I can stand here. In August of 2020, I stood here and said, I believe this entrance should be at North Drive. I wasn't the only resident. I said that. And it's perfectly okay for a resident of Newtown Grant to come here and say, I believe this entrance should be at Municipal Drive. That's fine. We're giving equal weight into making this presentation. My objection has been that this presentation to the suggestion, presentation to the board in executive session to use Municipal Drive was not done from this podium. It was done internally, and therefore it was not these suggestions were not given the same weight. It was baked in as if it's flour in the cake recipe. And it sowed mistrust. I mean, there's a mistrust in the residents of Delancey Court and this board right now. And I think that you have an opportunity here to restore it by now just moving this matter to a public matter. And I think that's how it should have been handled in the beginning. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But I do believe you have an opportunity to restore the trust of the residents by having such a meeting. Thank you.
I agree with Mr. McCarron. I think we need to do better with the transparency on these kind of issues. We've heard more than once about this specific one, but I think there are other instances we probably could do the same. So I think it's worth discussion by this board.
And I would think a meeting, executive session, inviting others, and a full open meeting, public meeting, that we could do both. So I'd be in favor of meeting and being transparent. Yes, sir. You're on.
My name is Steve Keeley. I am also from Delancey Court. And myself and my wife, Addie, live on Elfrid's Court, number 63. And we've been there about 4 years now. And I'd like to say a few words about this toll development at the corner of Twining Bridge Road and Route 413, as I think you all know. I believe that the acronym NIMBY is known to all of you, not in my backyard. And it also could refer to don't build it in my backyard. Well, here's the thing. The Toll Brothers development is not really in our backyard, as I think Frank pointed out. It's in Newtown Grant's backyard. However, the municipal complex is in my backyard. We live right across the street. And if I understand correctly, and I know he's not here tonight, so I don't know John Calabro personally, but I believe he's been advocating for putting the entrance to this toll development some 1,500 feet south of where it could be, up on North Drive, at the Municipal Drive location. Is that correct? Do I understand that?
The current idea is to have an exit on Municipal Drive.
Yes.
And it's Mr. Phil Calabro. I don't know if he was advocating anything.
Okay, I don't know either, because like I say, I don't know him. But there's a number of people in Delancey Court that believe that is the case. Whether it is or not, I don't know. However, it does mean moving the entrance to the toll property some 1,500 feet south of where it could be on North Drive, which is already protected by a traffic light. And I mentioned NIMBY. I hope that nobody is in this group advocating throwing garbage over the fence into the municipal court that could be easily handled by an existing traffic light on Route 413. I personally don't want it there at Municipal Drive. As we all know, Municipal Drive serves the township residents with emergency services, fire, police, and ambulance, and it's a critical intersection. To add additional traffic to that intersection, I think, is irresponsible. And what about handing over the land? The land that's on this property, the municipal property, 2.8 acres would have to be dedicated by this township to tolls use, and it would forever become unusable to the township or its residents. I think that's not in the order of common sense. Just to also be clear, I'm against settling with toll completely. Many years ago, toll had a very good reputation. I think it was a feather in any municipality's hat to have a toll community there. That's not the case anymore, and I can speak from personal experience living in a toll development. My wife and I have had many problems in our house, as well as our neighbors have had, due to negligent construction practices that toll undertook, and a general lack of response on their part to fix up these problems. We had plumbing backups, cross pipes, roof leaks, just poor overall general poor workmanship. And in order to correct these problems that Toll left us with, many of us have had to pay hundreds, if not thousands, and in a few cases, thousands of dollars to correct the problems that they left us with. How about the dead trees that they left over there? Anybody that wants to can go over to Delancey Court and see there's countless dead trees there, 60, 70 feet tall, that were left even due to after the pleading of the HOA and other residents to get them out of there when they were still building there. We ourselves had a tree that came down through an ice storm through the third floor roof of our house, third floor, that's how big it was, through the third floor into the second floor attic and into the first floor bedroom. And finally, Toll cleaned it up 8 months later. They cleaned the house up relatively quickly. But the tree they left there for 8 months. Now, is that a responsible builder? A billion-dollar builder? I don't think so. So I can't, to summarize, I can't believe Newtown Township, with its excellent reputation, would bend over backwards to cater to a builder with the reputation that Toll has. I understand maybe they have a right to build there, but to give up township land and just give in to Toll, I think, is irresponsible. And I don't think there's much common sense there. So thanks for listening. And I just leave you with one question. Where in this proposal is the common sense? I don't see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and where you live.
Certainly. My name is Michael Hafner. I live at 20 Franklin Circle, also in Delancey Court. Just initially, I'd like to say, with all the conversation that there's been, and I'm sure there will be much more to come at this point, to sort of echo Mr. Keeley's words there, it should be about common sense. One would think that this might be sort of an obvious solution that's being complicated by all kinds of conversation about traffic lights, about, using municipal land for other purposes. I know that, all areas want to be explored, and as Mr. McCarron also stated earlier there, everyone should have their opportunity, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to follow up like this, to ensure that the maximum, usage is made of township property, of where the location of the entrance will be. So we trust that that will be in your capable hands, or your successors in some instances as well. I just want to say, sort of following up on an earlier comment that was made in a previous meeting, Chief Hearn, who I see is here tonight, I would like to ask, if it's possible, if we could ask him about the use of Municipal Drive. It was mentioned by Mr. Sander earlier that he had the opinion that the police, fire, and emergency services, that they were not concerned about that at that point, or that it had been in some way already sort of discussed, addressed, things of that sort. So I don't know if that's possible, but I'd like to request that Chief Hearn, if he would be willing to as well, and if it's plausible to, ask that directly in terms of his comfort level with even this proposed alternative option, I believe, that was mentioned, that there could be some other additional road built, which of course would incur additional expenses, all drainage, et cetera, and the building of an additional road there. But when I started to think about this, something else came to my mind. In a critical situation, you're asking either the police or the fire chief or firemen, emergency vehicles, to then have to make a decision. I think there was some reference to the fact that that entrance would be for south only. So again, I think we're complicating matters, shall we say, at that point. And it could be a critical instance where let's take the north entrance, whoop, now we go out there, and there's some other type of trucks or things of that sort, you know, landscaping, et cetera, that are blocking it. And as we know, it could be that, you know, few seconds difference, minutes difference can make all the difference in terms of responding to emergencies at that point. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Like I said, if Chief Hearn, you know, is able to address that or to, you know, go ahead and mention that he feels comfortable with anything that has been discussed, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
It is my understanding that the police and emergency services were both consulted with this plan, and they took a look at it, that they did not have any kind of reservation. I don't know how to characterize it, but I don't want to put Chief Hearn on the spot right now unless he'd want to, maybe later on in his presentation later.
Yeah, that wasn't my object to necessarily put the chief on the spot there, but just to, you know, get a confirmation of the detail and thing of that sort that he, you know, all this had been taken into consideration, you know, and like you said, that it was, you know, cleared in some way at some earlier sessions or conversations, things of that sort.
And we'll certainly provide that in the future, if not tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any others for a public comment? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to minor approvals, and I believe there are no minor approvals as I look at our staff. So I'll go to reports of boards and committees. And I see Mr. Fiddler is here from the Planning Commission. And we have a report in writing from you.
Good evening, Alan Fiddler, Chairman of the Newtown Township Planning Commission. Here to give you a quick synopsis of our October 5, 2021 meeting. The Planning Commission with members of the Economic Development Committee were in attendance, and we reviewed the proposal from the Bucks County Planning Commission dated September 10, 2021. We noted that the new proposal includes meeting with both the Economic Development Committee and the Planning Commission, and has included the Newtown Business Commons Association in its considerations. While the Planning Commission and the Economic Development Committee have committed to updating the ordinance to revitalize the commons, all agreed that we need some guidance from the experts at the county to share their knowledge and experience in developing vibrant and successful business districts. The members recommended that the supervisors accept this proposal, as the Bucks County Planning Commission is familiar with both Newtown's business goals and with its jointure procedures for adopting new ordinances, as has presented a reasonably priced cost associated with the work. We did note that our EDC is referred to as a corporation, and this should be corrected to a committee. And we would also like some information on a possible timeline or an estimate of the time involved to complete the meeting and the drafting process by the Bucks County Planning Commission. And that concludes my report. Any questions? I'll try and answer them.
Mr. Fiddler.
Yes, Dave.
Thank you for being here. Now, you said that the Planning Commission unanimously decided to suggest that we approve of this, correct?
That is correct.
Now, you've been here in Newtown how long?
Pardon me?
How long have you been here in Newtown?
Well, just about all my life.
There you go.
Numbers don't go that high.
But, so you've been a long-standing member of this community, and as you see where we're going and you think about this proposal, what are your thoughts when it comes to what the business commons could be based upon what we're thinking about doing?
From an observation from the Planning Commission's discussions and some of the experience we've had and some of the life experiences we've seen over the years in Newtown Township, is progress is a continuation of what is, what should be, and what can be. And I think that we all realize that the business dynamics in the 21st century are a lot different than they were in the 80s and the 90s and even the early 200s. So I think that some evolutionary change should be considered as a vital improvement, not only to the employees of the Commons, but the employers to attract employees that see the amenities necessary to make their life and their workspace much more beneficial to their effectiveness and their enjoyment. The inclusion of some mixed uses that would serve as service businesses to support the employees and the residents in the surrounding area is a consideration the township, I think, is willing to consider. The degree of change, that is going to be the real difficult question. How much change do we want to be, including in the process? There's talk about education or recreational endeavors to be venues for, weekend usage. There's these service sector opportunities that would benefit, whether it's, hairdressers, whatever type of retail. All being said, will that attract employers to be able to recruit people to come to Newtown to live, work, and raise a family? It's going to be a convoluted process to get support for all of the ideas, but if we get 80% of the ideas that are acceptable to you, the Board of Supervisors, and the residents at large, we stand a good chance to see the business vitality to continue out there in the east end of Newtown Township. So, just my opinion.
Thank you. And right now it's just consideration of a proposal at the moment, and we can still decide later on
Yep.
what uses go in there.
And again, the Township Planning Commission has been wrestling with some of these things along with EDC and the Business Commons Associations for several months.
Sure.
And, we had also suggested that all of the minutes from the different work areas, EDC, Planning Commission, Business Commons, that are discussing the opportunities that we might consider to be viable, be included with the base information that's provided to the Bucks County Planning Commission to be able to get them up to speed quicker so that they know where some of the discussion points have been on the township's level and can help them be much more effective in putting together their recommendations without spending, time reinventing the wheel, so to speak.
What would you say to doing nothing at all?
Stagnation.
Okay.
I don't see things improving on their own without some involvement by the township in terms of improving things. I mean, you've seen it in the planned commercial district. Your predecessors decided that it was time to revitalize the PC district. Brixmore came in and was willing partner to do that. Was it perfect? Some of us don't necessarily agree, but it has made a vital impact on the viability of the businesses that are out there. Can that happen in the Business Commons? It's a real crapshoot.
Okay. And Mr. Fiddler, and I apologize, I'll wrap this up. But when you are sitting through these meetings, as you mentioned you have, and all the minutes that you want to kind of get together so that, the Bucks County Planning Commission can be more efficient with their time in getting back to us, what did you hear in terms of Newtown's reputation from a business perspective? From
businesses, there's some level of frustration. That's not always the responsibility of the township. It's the municipal planning code, the requirements for conditional use, zoning hearing board variances. All these things are outlined in the MPC. We can streamline the process, but the MPC is the guideline, and if the board and the administration want to follow the technical specific guidelines of the MPC, you can make a decision in a certain length of time. Businesses are generally very impatient about local government. They want to do it yesterday, and the business community's done that for years. They know the bottom line is profitability. The longer they wait, the more they spend, the harder it is to recoup the investment, and the decision is worth it. And I think Newtown is worth it, and I think we've had a good track record with the business community, and I hope it continues and improves.
All right, last question, and I'll let you go, I promise. Have you heard of us losing out on any opportunities because of our reputation?
I can't say that recently I have, but again.
Have you ever?
I have years ago.
Okay.
But, you know, I think some strides have been made in terms of the last 15 years. But again, I've been retired for 10, so I'm not out in the business community much like many of you. So, you know, I have a slanted perspective as to what things are like in the business community today. But I think things are looking well for Newtown Township in many categories, and if we can get the economic engine revitalized out there and bring in the amenities that most people want near their workplace, we should be able to attract young people as well as new people that want to move into Newtown Township.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought to add was, wouldn't getting the county, Bucks County's perspective on that add to what we can do with the business commons to improve it?
Not to belabor the point, but I had a meeting today with Steve Sanacero at Newtown Rotary, and he talked about the aging population in the state of Pennsylvania and the way we cannot continue to attract young, employable professionals to Bucks County, let alone Pennsylvania. And I think, you know, my perspective is we're kind of ahead of the curve, saying we recognize we have to make some changes and improvements to make viable opportunities for young professionals that want to relocate or start a business or a family or a career here in Bucks County. And, you know, if we can be on the forefront, they don't have to go to, you know, Falsington, they don't have to go, you know, Warminster, they can come to Newtown Township. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Alan?
Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have been asked by the technology people to give us a 5-minute break. They're having some difficulty with the cameras, unless it's been rectified since Alan came to the podium. 5-minute break, please, so we can adjust the cameras.
to.
Philly's #1 hit music.
Calling the October 13th meeting of the Newtown Board of Supervisors, Newtown Township Board of Supervisors, back into session. I hear that the technical difficulty is not fixed yet, but we gave them 5 minutes to do it, and we're going to just proceed. I think we owe that to everyone. Time for board member reports. I can go last. Anybody else have a report? Mr. Mack.
Thank you. I have maybe a couple. One from the Technology and Communications Committee has discussed the analytics that were recently done on the township website, and I want to thank Beth Leon, I think, was responsible for that. She prepared a view analytics from April through the middle of September, I believe, or something like that. And looking at the data, I think the committees are most interested in how often their pages on the website are viewed. I know the Board of Supervisors, this committee page gets 28 views per month, whereas the Economic Development Committee has gotten about 11 views per month. The Environmental Advisory Council gets about 4 per month, and the Planning Commission gets under 1 per month. So there needs to be some improvement there, and I think Mr. Dan Williams, who's the chair of the Technology Committee, is going to prepare a more detailed report and make some suggestions for further improvement so that the committees and other information can reach the public. I know we have something at the Environmental Advisory Council, but there was a discussion at the last meeting, which was on October 11th, regarding the development of an ordinance to ban the use of single-use plastics by businesses in Newtown Township, and the EAC plans to present a draft ordinance to the Board of Supervisors at a future date to encourage businesses and residents to limit or ban the use of single-use plastic bags. And they mentioned some other townships in a local area that have done this and have some model resolutions or ordinances to that effect. The EAC also discussed exploring several options of LED lighting, and I'd like to say more about that under new business, if I might. That's it for me. Thanks.
Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. I have the October 13th Park and Rec report. Register today for the following upcoming programs starting soon: Saturday morning art series, line dancing, senior fitness, savory naturals cooking series. Again, you can check out all these and other happenings at Newtown Fun. They also want to say thank you to the Newtown Business Commons Association for once again sponsoring the Halloween parade on Tuesday, October 26th at 1 p.m. Space is limited, pre-registration is required. Save the date for e-recycling event scheduled for Saturday, November 6th, 9 to 1. Please visit the Newtown Fund Facebook page or Park and Rec Facebook page for event details. Also, our annual craft bazaar will take place Saturday, November 20th from 10 to 3 p.m. Again, visit the Facebook page for details. And don't forget, pre-registration is required for all these programs. Also, I have a liaison report from the ambulance squad. I mentioned this to you, Dennis, and Mr. Lewis, the other day. They've been meeting with the county commissioners for an ongoing problem they're having with staffing and costs associated with the rising costs of running their business and having people on call and the salaries to keep those people waiting for people to call for ambulance service. So they've been working with the commissioners to work on a potential plan, a matching plan to match American Rescue Funds to try and help the problem. He sent me a couple letters from the Chiefs Association, and I'm going to forward them to the board and to Mr. Lewis. And I think he's interested in talking at least to the administration and possibly us if we have any questions about this issue. I'll send that out shortly or tomorrow. Next I have for my community outreach, Newtown Rotary Club is having our 19th annual used bicycle and sewing machine drive called Pedals for Progress. That's Saturday, October 30th, 9 a.m. to noon in the parking lot across from the old St. Andrew's Church on Sycamore. They take used bicycles and sewing machines and, excuse me, ship them to third world countries for people to help get around and even make a living. So, been doing it for 19 years, and we always do well. So if you have old bicycles you want to get rid of, bring them over there on the 30th. Also, the Newtown Rotary Club is holding a fundraiser October 23rd at Officer Brian Gregg Park to help raise funds to help the Newtown Borough Police Department purchase a tactical vest. Stay tuned for details on that. There's not a flyer yet available, so I don't have all the details. But I think that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Oxley?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay. I guess that leaves me. And we have sent bicycles to Liberia before, too, so I know that they are needed for transportation. I have 2 items to report about. I attended the Finance Committee meeting the last Tuesday of the month, and I reviewed with the with the Finance Committee about the American Recovery Program. There was a presentation at the consortium meeting, the Consortium of Townships in Bucks County, and that was passed on to me, a PowerPoint, and we kind of walked through that and kind of updated on each other on what's part of the American Recovery Plan and program, and how we can possibly spend the money eventually when all the frequently asked questions are reviewed and we have guidelines. We're being asked by Township Supervisors Association to wait until we have those guidelines before we start spending a lot of money, but we want to know what's eligible before we make a, yes. Oh, I thought you were pointing something out to me, John, I'm sorry. So we talked about the ARPA, and we also discussed with our finance director the status of the budget and the new budget that will be actually presented by the manager next week. More about that later. I also attended the jointure meeting along with Mr. Mack last Thursday, and we talked about two major items. One was the distributive antenna systems, which is otherwise known as 5G, and the regulations that the jointure wants to put on mainly the wireless support systems, small and large wireless support systems. So those are the posts that the antennas fit on. So the 5G is being allowed by the federal government, and we want to regulate it so that it's not unattractive and not harmful or anything to folks in our 3 townships. That and the other item we discussed was the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has been underway for well over a year, and we discussed some timeframes. They are narrowing down the items that have not yet been addressed, or we've been waiting for research data, for population data, which we're just now getting. But the Bucks County Planning Commission is assisting us in writing that, and hopefully in a couple of months they'll be finished with the write-up, and then we can start discussing at Planning Commission meetings and Township Supervisor meetings, so that by maybe a year from now we have a newly developed comprehensive plan. So those are the items that I have to report. And I see Mr. Oxley has something else he'd like to say.
Yes, I apologize. I wanted to just say thank you to the board and to members of the administration here. You know, it's been a tough time for my family, you know, losing some loved ones, my mother-in-law, and appreciate everyone. Calls, texts, cards, flowers, and showing up to her services as well. So it definitely gives me, you know, in these moments where our community can be torn apart because of differences, it definitely still gives me a sense of community that we do have here in Newtown, and I just wanted to say thank you.
You are welcome, and thank you. I do believe we can move on to our public hearing, and that is the public hearing for Robert and Valerie Mayon, 144 Pennswood Drive, a PDR variance hearing for an in-ground pool.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, as you noted, is a public hearing to discuss a request for an amendment to the final plan of Nob Hill. It is a PRD, and anytime somebody wants to exceed any of the dimensional requirements on the final plan of a PRD, it must apply for a what we call a PRD variance, and that is what this hearing is for. In this case, the Mayons want to install an in-ground swimming pool and associated improvements while removing an existing atrium and concrete patio that will result in the net increase of 1,160 square feet, and the resulting impervious surface ratio will be 29.54%, where only 25% is permitted by Nob Hill's final plan. So I would mark some board exhibits before we begin the hearing. Exhibit 1 will be the application filed by Robert and Valerie Mann. Exhibit B2 will be the Nob Hill Homeowners Association architectural request form. Exhibit B3 will be acknowledgement by the Mann's neighbors of the proposed installation of the pool and their approval of them moving forward with that. Exhibit B4 will be the Township Manager's memorandum to the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors outlining the relief requested. Exhibit B5 will be Remington Vernick Engineers letter dated September 13th, 2021. Exhibit B6 will be the notice of a proof of publication, I should say, of tonight's hearing. Exhibit B7 is the proof via photograph that the property was posted with notice of tonight's hearing, and those are the board exhibits for the hearing. I would ask now that Mr. and or Mrs. Mann come forward, please.
I'm Robert Mayon, excuse me. I live at 144 Pennswood Drive.
I apologize for saying man. Is it Mayon?
Mayon?
Yeah.
Mayon. Like
okay.
McMahon.
Gotcha. And Mr. Mayon, do you have a witness with you?
He's the building the pool.
Yes, Rob McCubbin, MCCUBBIN from Anthony and Sylvan Pools.
Okay. Mr. Mayon, would you tell the board what you'd like to do and why you feel that you'd like to have the relief of allowing additional impervious coverage on your property?
Me and my wife would like to build a pool on our property. Because of the high voltage power lines, our property is shaped a little bit different than the rest of the properties in our neighborhood. They're more square. Ours kind of, you see with the plans, I don't know if you have a picture of that, kind of gets cut off on an angle. I only have one neighbor to my right. He's the one that provided the letter of acceptance. I have neighbors across the street, but to my left is common ground of the neighborhood that has high power lines running over. You can't build anything there. There's woods behind me. I feel like if my property wasn't next to the power lines, that this would be a non-issue. I wouldn't have gone over the allotted, non-permeable surface. But just hoping, like to have a pool for the summertime. It'd be nice. And seems to be plenty of ground around us. There's, woods and everything, and a huge lot to the left of us that's all grass. And also, Sylvan Pools is incorporating, I think per the township, a water system. He could probably explain that a little bit better. That helps with the runoff of water and to make sure there's no problems. And we're friends with our neighbors. We don't want them to have any water issues in their house. So, hopefully everything gets built properly and it won't be an issue.
Questions from the board?
Nobody big cannonball jumps that's going to splash water all the way over your neighbor.
Apparently that water treatment system's a big hole in the ground with a bunch of rocks in it, right? So there's not clay down there that doesn't absorb water. There's a spot for the water to go.
It looks like everything's in order. I mean, I look at the engineer's letter, and it really is just sign-offs and changes in a few changes, minor changes in the plans and some permits and mostly administrative things. You did see the Nob Hill letter. I think there were 4 items on it.
Out front of my house?
No.
It was an exhibit that we marked. It's Nob Hill Homeowners Association Architectural Request Form. I believe you had probably filled this out and submitted it. It was returned with 4 conditions written on it.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
You aware of those?
Yes.
Okay. And are you agreeable to comply with those conditions?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And also the conditions set forth in the Remington-Vernick letter of September 13th? Okay.
That's all I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
You mentioned neighbors. Usually we ask if they got any complaints or talked this over with neighbors. Are there any issues?
No, I'm very friendly with my neighbors. Our kids play together. Our backyards back up to each other, and they're my only neighbor that we share a fence with. We have neighbors across the street. But they, we went over and asked them, hey, we're getting a pool, and we're thinking about getting a pool. We're going through the process. I wrote out, a little paper for them and say, hey, add anything to this that you want, and sign the bottom so I can submit it with the rest of my paperwork to start the process.
Right. Did you go before the Planning Commission and you got some advice from
last
them?
time.
Usually they have advice to get a couple of letters from neighbors, and so you have those, you could submit those.
Yeah, this is my second time here, but I mean,
okay.
Apparently the neighbors and all the surrounding people were alerted that we were getting a pool, but I had to get, permission from the person next to me.
Okay, no problem, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Kyle?
I was just going to say, you putting in a hot tub too?
Yeah.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about for the winter time.
The pool's smaller because we're trying to stay, close to that barrier.
So
But
just want to make sure you're getting something for you and the missus as well.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. And there's an existing patio that we're also shrinking, so we're doing as much as we can to keep it down. But we're a little bit over, so we appreciate, an approval would be nice.
Yeah. Just how old are your kids?
6 and 11.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll get a lot of use out of it.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got 4 children, right? So they're all young, and my wife and I, we focus on them so much that we forget about ourselves. So I just want to make sure you weren't forget about you.
Yeah, we're homebodies, so we want to spend more time at home, and it's, pool's nice in the summertime. Summer gets hot.
Awesome.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none?
I could frame a motion, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
we need to frame a motion,
if
yes.
you would allow.
And then I'll go through those machinations.
Sure. If the board is of a mind, it would be a motion to grant the application of Robert and Valerie Mayon 144 Pennswood Drive, Newtown Township, for a PRD variance to permit them to demolish their existing atrium and concrete patio and construct an in-ground pool and associated improvements in the rear yard of the single-family detached dwelling. These modifications will result in a net increase of no more than 1,160 square feet of impervious surface on the property for a total of 29.54% impervious surface, where only 25% is permitted in accordance with the final plan of Nob Hill. This property is located in the R1 medium density residential zoning district. The PRD variance is granted subject to the applicant's compliance with the following conditions. First, the applicant shall comply with all comments set forth in the Remington-Vernick Engineers Review Letter dated September 13th, 2021. Two, the applicant shall comply with the Nob Hill conditions of approval as set forth on Exhibit B2 dated August 24th, 2021. And the applicants, prior to the signing of final plans and their being recorded, shall pay all outstanding fees and costs owed to the township for review of their PRD variance.
Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Have a second? Second. Have a motion and a second. Now I can ask if there's any public comment. And I can say, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of granting this, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passed 4-0.
Thank you.
That concludes the
very
hearing.
much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. And we're moving right along to reports of officials. Our engineer.
Yep, thank you. Tonight I wanted to discuss with the board some grant funding that's available and possible application if the board is in agreement. So currently the Penndot Multimodal Transportation Fund grant is available for municipalities to fund various types of pedestrian improvements. The grant is due at the beginning of next month, so we were discussing with township staff the possibility of applying for some sidewalk connections within the business commons and, possibly creating a grant application for that. So I included some of the information in the grant in my engineer's report. I'm happy to answer any questions on it, but tonight we're just seeking consensus from the board so that we can prepare that application if the board wishes.
Were there questions? I see Mr. Mack.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It says we're approving you to apply for this grant, right?
Correct, yep.
Let's be careful. This is a discussion item as reflected on the agenda. If the board wishes to take action under this, you'd have to first make a motion to amend the agenda to include this item, then vote on it at that time.
Okay.
And there would be one more meeting of the board before the November 5th deadline.
Okay, so we have time to do that.
Is that enough? Sorry for interrupting. I just want to make sure that that does allow sufficient time to do the grant if we make a decision at our October 27th meeting.
So we would have to have a resolution adopted prior to November 5th. So there would need to be some sort of action by the board, resolution up to approve, to submit the grant, basically.
But October 27th would be time enough for you to do that?
Sure, yep.
Well, and, sorry, can I just finish?
Go ahead.
Starting, we would get an opportunity before that October 27th to see the application, what exactly you're proposing in that application, because, I've had conversations with Mr. White, who's the head of the Newtown Business Commons Association a long time ago about putting sidewalks in, and he was of the opinion that it would be difficult because most of the land there is privately owned, and we had discussed this once, you'd have to have eminent domain taken over some of that to put in sidewalks. So, but I know that there needs to be sidewalks, there needs to be connections, there need to be crosswalks. I mean, this was all in a plan going back to 2006. I don't know if you've seen that, but I recently came across it for what work needs to be done there. So it's not just sidewalks, it's crosswalks, so people can walk safely and with traffic. So all I wanted to know was that we would be able to see this before it was submitted, and then we would vote on it at the same time, I
Yeah,
guess.
absolutely. The board and the township, we would work with the township in terms of, catering the scope of the project. And again, this is just a discussion. Possible scope could include that. There's other areas too that we could focus on if that's what the township wishes at this point. But certainly the board would review the application prior to it being submitted.
I just want a sidewalk to the Newtown Brewery down there. I've been asking for that every meeting.
We'll see what we can do.
We'll keep you off the street that way. So is there anything else we need to know or give you some guidance on around this issue?
Mr. Chairman, I think
the best.
what the engineer
Yeah.
is looking for is just a consensus from the board to sort of move ahead with the application process.
Okay,
I think it's a good idea.
I do too.
Okay.
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
Now, you said it doesn't specifically have to be in total for the business comments, right? Is that correct?
That was just an idea that we had discussed, but it
Okay.
could be, anywhere that the township.
So say like we got the grant, or a portion of the grant, right? And we saw a piece of sidewalk, for instance, like on Sycamore Street, right? There's a piece of sidewalk that just like completely ends in front of like Fred Bean's, like connecting that all the way through. Could we utilize say we do the business comments, but utilize a portion of that to connect that sidewalk where like Luna Chic is, and would that be a possibility?
Yeah, as long as we have that scope outlined in the application.
Okay.
Typically, if that's approved, we would stay within that scope, if the grant's approved.
Yeah, because there's just a piece where, you're walking in and it stops, and then I think that would be important, so.
Yeah, and point out that they're actually looking at remodeling. I don't know if that was in the plans. That was a while ago. Sidewalk in there, might be worth looking into. Yeah, just
I
suggesting.
know they're going to bring the building out to the sidewalk area.
Yeah, I don't know if they were putting in a sidewalk. I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
There is some, I think, going in the front.
There's
there.
already sidewalk there
Yeah.
to the front of Fred Bean's, but
And then
it
it's
stops.
going to
Cobbled.
stop
Yeah.
at their property,
Like a
so,
brick.
yeah.
So there's nothing across the frontage you're saying in that plan? Is that what you're talking about, from the frontage to the road, right?
If I remember correctly, there is sidewalk proposed along the road frontage, but I don't know if it extends further south towards the intersection.
Okay.
I don't think it does. I think it's rocks, river rock.
Yeah.
in there.
Where the old house is,
Right.
right? Okay, I got you. I understand. I got you.
There's other sidewalks in the shopping center, which was always presented to us to be walkability, but then they just end. And, I'm not quite sure where we need more sidewalks. I know that residents near the business commons would love to have places to walk through the commons, but many more people go to the bricks more. And it always irks me to see a sidewalk ending, before it gets to Sycamore Street, for example. That kind of thing. And it's just short distances, but there's a lot of sidewalks that are not connected in this town.
Right, yep.
Do we get any kind of, how are we going to have some kind of input of where we think we need to look at this in terms of different locations that you have to outline in your proposal?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly, we'll work with township staff to outline, those locations. That's usually what we've done in past grant applications. I work with Micah just to refine the scope. Certainly, you'll see the application as well. And, we'll all work together in terms of figuring out the scope and locations just to finalize it in order for us to prepare the necessary documents for the grant.
So we can encourage residents to email us and give us their opinion on maybe finding particular places that they know about that could be improved? Just putting it out there.
You could drive around and take pictures, Mr. Mack. And,
I love doing that,
yeah.
yeah.
There you go.
And if not this year, in future years, if our priority this year is making connections in the business commons and/or a piece of road on Sycamore Street, certainly it doesn't hurt to have a list of priorities going forward.
Well, I mean, I was just saying that because as we continue to look at what the township will evolve into, and we already have those sidewalks kind of already there and pieces are missing, as to Mr. Mack's point, I think it would be very helpful to just kind of add those in, before, or considering adding those in while we look at putting sidewalks into the business commons at the same time.
If the scope of work could include that, then
Yep.
good.
Yep.
All right. I think we have consensus from the board on that issue.
All right, that sounds good.
While we're still on the engineer's report, could I
Yeah,
ask you another question?
Yeah, sure.
How are we doing on the road program? And perhaps Mr. Lewis would even need to help with that.
So the road program is going very well. They're expecting the contractor to wrap up next week, and then we'd have the payment on the next agenda to the contractor.
Thank you.
I had one other item to provide an update on, if possible. One thing between last month and this month, we've submitted the township's annual MS4 report to DEP for the township stormwater permit. This is just a typical annual thing that's required of municipalities. It summarizes all the efforts that's been done between June of last year and July of this year. So moving forward, we'll just be completing some annual tasks as a part of that permit. Regarding the pollution reduction plan, which was approved by the township a few years ago, that goes along with the permit, and that outlines projects that we need to implement moving forward as part of our permit. So some of those things include the meadow conversions and basin retrofits. So Township Public Works is working on those improvements, and we have over the next few years of our permit cycle to complete them. So those are slated in the next few years to get worked on. And then we also applied for the grant for the stream bank stabilization. That's also was included in that report. So hopefully we'll get some good news from that grant later on in the fall.
Yes, Mr. Mack. Here's one more question.
Just to follow up, I noticed in the October 7th monthly engineering report, you mentioned that the Brixmore developer is currently preparing the post-development traffic study, which they anticipate completing in the fall. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. They provided just the general fall timeline. I will reach out to them again regarding their progress, since our last discussion. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything more from Liana?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Yay, thank you. All right, that brings us to the solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item on our report this evening is a resolution accepting dedication of a portion of the right-of-way of Durham Road associated with the Delancey Court development. I would request a motion from the board to adopt the resolution accepting dedication of the portion of right-of-way consisting of 1.5663 acres as described in the legal description and as depicted on a plan attached to the resolution, and also authorizing that once the township has obtained dedication of that right-of-way, that it be authorized to convey it to Penndot as required by the final plan of Delancey Court.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oxley. Any discussion from the board? I had a little bit of trouble finding where that 1.56 acres was. Is it?
It's
a couple
the
of different
southernmost frontage of Delancey Court along Durham Road. There were two prior dedications of Durham Road right-of-way that are north of this particular location.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from the public? See Mr. McCarron?
I just have a question exactly to understand what is being dedicated. I had worked on a vegetation permit with Penndot. We wanted to maintain some land along on Durham Road. And what the person, Hillary Fink, had told me is that there's an existing right-of-way that extends 20 feet from the center line to the shoulder. And she said it covers basically the area, the first area of grass up to the other side of the telephone pole. So what additional land, is that, we're not talking the same land, I assume, we're talking more land beyond that point? Is that?
From the plan, it looks like there's an initial 20 feet and then an additional 40 feet for a total of 60 feet of right-of-way that is being dedicated to the township.
Okay, so when that's dedication, so that's grass area that we mow now. So if you're going to then give it to, I guess you're saying it was required under the plan to give it to Penndot?
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess, I hope we don't have any issue mowing our lawn, I guess. I don't know.
I don't think you will.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
We'll make a note. So any other questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the resolution for accepting the dedication of the portion of the right-of-way for on Durham Road for Delancey Court, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That resolution passes 4-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item on our report is authorization from the board to take further legal action against KVK Tech for zoning violations. This is a property in the business commons that has installed illegally several trailers and is using those trailers as part of its business. That violates the zoning ordinance. The zoning officer sent the appropriate and required zoning enforcement notice to the property owner. The property owner has not appealed that zoning enforcement notice to the zoning hearing board. Therefore, it's appropriate now to take further action against them, which will consist of filing a civil complaint with the district judge and proceeding before the district judge. I will also be asking the district judge to levy not only a $500 fine for the violation, but also to levy $500 fine per day that the violation continues after a judgment is entered by the district judge. So I would ask for a motion to authorize our office to take further legal action as appropriate against KVK Tech.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Solicitor, I have a question in regards to, the fines, and it's all well and good, right? We can fine, and, there's a process in place, but what's the end result? Like, how do we collect?
Well, you collect.
That could get dragged on forever, correct?
It can certainly get dragged on. Collection sometimes is not easy, but there are rules of civil procedure for collecting judgments and fines. We'd have to file the appropriate papers. We may have to have the sheriff come out and levy on their property, but ultimately we will make every attempt to collect. There is also an alternative of, if this continues to drag on and they just do not remove the violation, the zoning violation, and cure it, we could also go straight to common pleas on with an injunction to have them ordered by the Court of Common Pleas to remove it, and if they don't, they'll be subject to sanctions for violating a court order. But we have not come to that point yet. We're proceeding under the MPC to see if we can get some relief, and if we need to take further, more drastic, I'll call it, action, we will bring that to the board and ask for your approval.
Okay. Thank you.
We don't know what those trailers are being used for, do we?
I've never been inside them. I can only, in that they're located on the property, I assume they're being used for the business that is ongoing on the property, but I do not know what they are being used for.
It's
And
not
I don't
to,
think the zoning officer does either.
It's not to house illegal aliens or anything like that.
I don't think so, but I wouldn't say definitively no.
I do have a question. It may be a reiteration. We have given them all the proper notices and done everything on our part to inform them. And
Correct.
yes.
That's correct. Mr. Lewis has
Yep.
drafted the appropriate zoning enforcement notices, served them by regular and certified mail. We have the green card that they received it. It's been well over 30 days now, and it's time to take the next step.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of this authorization to take further legal action, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A final item on our report is authorization to draft and advertise an amendment to the Township's weed ordinance in accordance with EAC recommendations. We've received a proposed ordinance, all written out in quite a lot of detail. I believe it also refers to some exhibits that will contain the actual names and types of plants that are identified as noxious and or invasive and prohibit those in the township. And also it defines certain terms and provides exempted areas, provides for the removal and cutting of weeds and noxious plants, and provides for penalties for violation of the ordinance. Again, this was a recommendation of the Environmental Advisory Committee, and in order to take it to the next step and draft the ordinance and bring it back to the supervisors for consideration based on advertising it, I need your approval this evening.
So moved.
Second. I have a question. Is that all right?
I have a motion and a second. You're on the floor.
Okay. So let me understand the process. You're going to take the recommendation, work it up into a format that's acceptable, and then we'd have an opportunity to see that before it's advertised, correct? And approve, the next step would be to approve the advertising of it, make it public.
The item on tonight's agenda reads authorization to draft and advertise.
Yeah, I don't think we should do both.
That's your prerogative.
I think we need to see it before it goes out to the public, assuming you're going to make some kind of changes. I don't know.
Well, it starts out by saying it's a resolution of Newtown Township, so we've got to strike the word resolution and put in ordinance, but there are other revisions that will need to be made in order to put this in appropriate township format for consideration as an ordinance.
Well, I just think whatever changes, we need an opportunity to see it, so it's, available to the public for discussion here before it goes out to be advertised. I'm just thinking we need a two-step process here.
I have a question about the whole concept. So someone's got weeds on their lawn or on their between cracks on their sidewalks, and they get fined or something, or?
There are notice provisions, Mr. Oxley, in the ordinance designating the providing notice and time to come into compliance with the ordinance, the standard due process provisions that almost all of our ordinances contain, and then it sets forth the penalties for violation.
And who enforces that? Like, does we have someone in the township that goes around, and how does that work?
I don't think we have a designated weed person, but it would be similar to the enforcement of any other township ordinances. Generally, the way they're enforced is that we receive a complaint from somebody saying, wow, look what's going on this property. That's when we send someone out and check it out.
And who would we send out?
I don't know if the zoning officer himself would go out as the code enforcement officer. You'd send one of your staff.
Mr. Lewis, that might have been a question to you.
So Chief Forsyth is helping me out with this at the moment. I am the zoning officer, so.
Well, this isn't a zoning ordinance. This is a standalone ordinance, but the code enforcement officer.
Right, so it would be Chief Forsyth, and we'd
At
work
this
together
point in
to
time.
There you
rectify the
go.
situation.
And I would say that in my experience, it does happen that there's a complaint from a neighbor or from a homeowners association. I've also seen, I don't know if this, I haven't looked at it in enough detail to know if it's in there, but the mowing of common areas in HOAs, if that's impacted. I know some HOAs have asked for like less necessary cuts, fewer necessary cuts during the year.
Yeah, I think this deals more with the types of growth. I know it deals with
Yep.
weeds, but it really focuses on invasive
Yes.
plants versus native plants, and there's a definition here of controlled plants, which are different than invasive plants. It's pretty interesting. It's much more cutting edge than our weed ordinance is right now.
I do really appreciate those lists, and we buy plants accordingly, so.
I appreciate you reading through all that, but I think, what are we voting on here? Are we voting to approve you to rewrite this as an ordinance and to advertise it, or are we just voting on you to?
I believe that's the motion on the floor.
That's the motion.
Now,
I
if we want
object.
to
I would object to that.
we can amend that motion.
Can we please amend that motion?
If the person who made the motion and the person who seconded it,
I'm fine with it.
You're fine with
Amending it, yeah.
amending it to
I'm
just
also-
authorizing the drafting of the amendment.
I'm fine with that, thanks.
So that is now the motion on the floor, if I've done that procedurally correct. Is there any other discussion from the board?
The seconder has agreed to.
Yes.
Okay, then it's appropriate that.
Kyle made the motion and John made the second.
Right. Board comment and public comment on the motion now to draft an amendment to the township's weed ordinance and distribute it to the Board of Supervisors for review.
Yep. I do want to ask if there's any public comment on this, because I do see one or two EAC members in attendance.
We have a big problem.
Could you give us your name and?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ellen Snyder. I live on Newgate Road. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't live there anymore. Rumford Court. We have a problem with invasive weeds. We have to live up to what other townships are doing to stop them from invading all of our properties, public and private. So this ordinance is in accordance with other townships and the Saldo as well. Is that right, Jan? And it's just really common sense. If you let the invasive weeds just take over everything, you'll never be able to stop it. And that's all we're doing, is saying you can't plant anything that's considered to be a noxious weed. And if it's overgrown on your property, then somebody's going to come out and enforce that code. I don't know who that is. As Micah said, I have no idea who that will be, but this is something that we are researching, and we've done a lot of research on this. So this is what we're putting forward, and we hope you'll agree to hear more about it. And we will come before you and explain it in a much better manner.
Thank you. Want to go ahead and call the question? There was no other public comment?
Yeah, I was good.
Okay, seeing none.
Hold on.
Okay.
John DiApril, Newtown Grant, biggest and the best. And speaking of Newtown Grant and all the other communities in Newtown, which Newtown is made up of, is mostly the communities, and they all have their own noxious weed ordinance, or whatever you want to call it. To start another ordinance, there goes more money, but you Democrats like spending money. To develop a new ordinance is going to be costly. And, like I said, the homeowners associations take care of theirs. And other than that, I don't know what the breakdown is, but probably 90% of Newtown is homeowners associations. They take care of their own. So I don't know what this is, except for nuisance maybe, and from somebody don't even know where they live. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Thank you.
This is not something that's going to have a high price tag involved with it, not at all. It's not anything that's going to cost more than an occasional inspection if somebody has an issue with it. That's it.
All right. Motion's on the floor. It's been amended. Public comment's been given. Let's go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of authorizing the drafting of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our report.
All right. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General fund balance as of this evening is $4,591,264. Planned expiration is before the board with no action required. We have Chief Hearn to give his monthly report. Evening, Chief.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, board members. Month of September, police report. We documented 1,552 calls for service. We logged 18,356 patrol miles on our vehicles. We had 10 arrests, 5 were DUI related, 3 narcotics, 1 simple assault involving a domestic, and 1 auto theft. There were 15 new cases referred to detectives and 5 crime scenes processed. We did have a commercial burglary, which we do have a person of interest on. We had 1 sex offense, also person of interest on, 1 vehicle theft, and a commercial fire investigation. We did have a sudden death of an infant. Unfortunately, it was a tragic incident. All officers responded and administered CPR, but it was not successful. So our prayers and thoughts go out to that family. We had 66 traffic crashes, 6 injuries. 18 of those traffic crashes involved deer. We had 115 traffic citations issued, 119 warnings were issued. Notable jobs. On September 1st, we had a SWAT activation at Tullytown with an armed subject. It was successfully resolved. We did have a narcotic overdose on 9/16. No Narcan was used, and the subject was transported for treatment. We had 2 truck enforcement details involving 20 truck inspections, 5 citations, and 17 warnings, and 2 vehicles placed out of service. Public service announcements. Schools are open. Please be careful and alert. Pay close attention to yellow school buses with the flashing lights and in the school zones. As I reported with the traffic crashes, although deer season again is on the rise, that time of year. Use caution, slow your speed down, use the high beams when no oncoming traffic is approaching you, don't swerve onto oncoming traffic. We are having a drug take-back event here, October 23rd from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Township building. Any unused prescriptions, you're encouraged to drop them off. I'd like to thank Supervisor Dennis Fisher for showing up October 1st for our swearing in of our new officer, Nicholas Vasali. And our community events held in October. Busy month. On 9/1, we had coffee with a cop at Factory Donuts. On 9/9, we had water ice with a cop at Rita's. And on 9/11, we had a car show with cops at Veterans Park. They were all very well attended, and I thank the supervisors also for showing up at them. Our next police consortium test is November 6th. You have to sign up at policeapp.com. We are an equal opportunity employer, so if you know anyone, please encourage them to show up, take the test, and apply to Newtown Township. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, in particular, if you would like me to address the Delancey Court issue.
Okay, number one, could you repeat that very last part about November 6th?
November 6th is the Police Department consortium test given by Bucks County. It's for all 39 agencies. It's one application fee of $50. They apply at policeapp.com. They're notified of when the testing is, and they can apply at each of the 39 agencies that they wish to work at.
Great, and they should designate Newtown Township.
Yes, sir.
As I could say, the biggest and the best. Or not the biggest, maybe, but. And yes, I would ask you that question about responding to the question about the Delancey Court.
I was at the meetings prior to regarding Twining Bridge exit plans. I sat through many of the meetings you had pertaining to that. I was involved in providing information about an exit at Municipal Drive. All of our police vehicles have a traffic emitter, which actually changes the traffic signal to a green signal if a traffic signal is placed there. So our cars do have the emergency equipment. Land development is a township planner issue. It's not a police department issue. I was asked if the police department would have a problem. We would treat that intersection like any other intersection. The police station as well, I was advised we would have a secondary egress access close to the police station, so it would not delay response times pertaining to us. And since I wasn't included in all the options, I can't give you an educated decision as what the best is. I just don't have a problem with this one. So if you guys come up with a better one, it's your call. But we're looking for the best safety of the township. So.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I guess wanted to also emphasize the deer versus car. In the past week, I've had to stop for 3 deer. Luckily, nobody was around me, so nobody was behind me, so I didn't have to worry about getting hit. But this is the time of year, September, October, November, even a little bit into December. So, thank you. Thank you for reporting. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Mack?
Hi, Chief. I, again, note that the DUI arrests are really up to 122 this year compared to, so far this year, compared to 84 last year. I don't know if there any reason why you think there are more DUIs?
We do have one particular officer that is an expert at DUI arrests. And matter of fact, that officer, Officer Helvig, received the 2021 Top Gun Award, winner from the DUI Association, which is a private organization. Recognize and thank you officers for the work in reducing the threat of impaired drivers on the highway. He does do a very effective job enforcing sobriety checkpoints and DUIs, particularly on the bypass.
Very good. I'd like to get one of those devices that change the light.
Good luck.
Maybe I can get it on the black market somewhere in China. I don't know. China. I noticed there's a new section in your report, the data-driven approaches to crime and traffic. And under there's the use of decoy cars under traffic enforcement. I see that there's no traffic citations issued for those decoy cars, if I'm reading this right, whereas signs and boards do result in warnings or citations. Can you explain how these things work to control traffic and speeding?
Well, the speed board or traffic signal board that we got out there that flashes your speed sign, that's to remind the operators if you're exceeding the posted speed limit. And hopefully they have enough sense to calm down and slow down and watch their driving. The decoy cars are provided by us. They provide an added enforcement tool that provides visibility out on high-traveled roadways, and they're placed where we strategically need them. The traffic enforcement initiatives, based on complaints by neighbors, if they feel that they're having an issue pertaining to a certain area, when they report it to the police, we design a strategic plan. When some timing allows itself, I will deploy officers out there to monitor traffic.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Chairman, I have 2 more items under my report for the board's consideration. As was on last agenda's meeting, the consideration to approve the Bucks County Planning Commission proposal for planning services for the OLI and LI zoning districts at a cost not to exceed $2,760.
Motion approved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments from the board? Questions, comments?
I'd like to make a comment. I think that, you know, we're taking a really good step here, just getting some options for what potentially can help our township flourish in a proper way going forward. We live in a great community. We want to make sure it thrives continuously, and we also want to make sure we provide the proper services. And all of this provides us with an opportunity to do that. You know, I know last year we were heavily concerned and debated the millage increase, and this is going to very much help us from having to ever, not ever, but reduce the opportunity of having to do that going forward in the future. If we can revitalize, figure out what makes sense, and then also provide us with an opportunity to win. We have to be very competitive, especially in Bucks County. Newtown is a gem, and we've heard that many times in the EDC from different sources about different businesses that would love to come in if we had the right amenities and so forth. Our access to 295 now, excuse me, our close proximity to Philadelphia, our close proximity to New York. You know, some businesses would love to be here. We just need to make sure we do it the right way. I know there's some concerns about, you know, what would happen in terms of, you know, losing our charm, but I also know that we owe it to ourselves to invest in the community, to leave this community the way that we received it, but also make it better for the children that will be here and their grandchildren. I myself am only here in Newtown because my wife, I'm a Newtonian now, yes, but all of you know that my wife brought me here, and she's lived here since she was a little girl. And, you know, when we were in college, she would talk about Newtown and how much she enjoyed it. And I want my kids to do the same thing and come back and raise families here. And I think the best way we do that is by providing them with an opportunity to come back to places that are going to be attractive to them and want to work here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from the board? My comment was, I think, answered by Mr. Fiddler when he was here, so. I do know there's a lot of square footage in the business commons that's empty, and if there could be a retrofit that would work. Any comments from the public on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of approving the Bucks County Planning Commission proposal, funding it, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 4-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last item under my report for the board's consideration is the Household Hazardous Waste Collection Program with the county. The Bucks County Planning Commission has also provided the township with a proposal for a 4-year contract. The program allows residents to safely dispose of hazardous products such as pesticides, flammable liquids, corrosives, and batteries. The cost to participate in the program is based on population for each municipality. Proposals in your packets for your consideration, so the appropriate motion would be consideration to approve the 4-year contract with the Bucks County Planning Commission to be able to participate in the Household Hazardous Waste Collection Program.
Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from the board? Very, very quick question. We've been doing this for 4 years already.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Good. Any other questions from the board? Questions from the public? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor of, where am I in my agenda here? Approving the 4-year contract with the Bucks County Planning Commission to participate in Household Hazardous Waste Collection Program. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? 4-0. It is approved.
That's all I have under my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer, Secretary Treasurer,
Assistant Treasurer.
Assistant.
The minutes, I moved that we approve the September 22nd, 2020 Board of Supervisors minutes.
Any
I have to
comments or
abstain. I
questions?
wasn't here. So I
Okay.
abstain.
You can abstain. All those in
The
favor?
comments,
Oh, yeah.
if I have a comment, can I make a comment?
Yes, yeah, please.
These minutes also include a lot of the comments made from the Delancey Court residents are attached to it, so when anybody wants to download those minutes, they can see these comments that were submitted in detail.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Any comment from the public?
There's a public comment here by Joe Hillock where it says that he said he objected to this proposal and would like a full-scale traffic study to determine whether the intersection would warrant a traffic light. Joe had circulated to some of us afterwards his notes, and what his notes said was, according to this, as stated in my letter to the Township, a precondition that a traffic light be installed is an absolute necessity before construction begins. And that's what I recall him saying, not what's said in here.
Okay.
What's it say in there versus what you think he said?
So this says now, he objected to this proposal, which I gather, and would like a full-scale traffic study to determine whether the intersection would warrant a traffic light. But what he said in his notes he sent said, as stated in my letter to the Township, a precondition that a traffic light be installed is an absolute necessity before construction begins. That's very different, whether it should be done versus...
I think, wasn't his notes included in the minutes?
I didn't see it. I mean, I saw everyone else's minutes. I have if you can find it in here, great, but I just don't see it.
I didn't, you don't, sorry?
I submitted them, everything that I would have
Yeah.
Could-
I mean, I'm not saying, if they're in here, I looked through it, I didn't see it.
Well, can we find his notes after this meeting and attach them after?
And/or we could ask Mr. Hillock for a copy of them if we can't find them.
That's true.
Okay, can we do that?
Sure. But,
Thank you.
But in any event, what he said is different than what was written that he said. And, I mean,
Okay.
it's on video, right? So you can all
Yes,
check
it
it.
Yes.
is,
Okay, thank you.
So procedurally, do we have to do an amendment to the motion or anything? Okay. As long as the minutes will reflect our discussion now that we will include those. Be sure they're included. Mr. Hillock's comments will be included.
Mr. Sandin?
No, I apologize. I missed the possible question that arose.
There was
You missed the most exciting part of the meeting.
Well, the minutes and the bills list, John, I mean, I generally look forward to them the most, but,
The minutes were supposed to include comments that were submitted on paper
by Joe Hillock.
And Mr. McCarron says it's missing from the attachments to the minutes. So we suggested that we would look for those submitted comments from Mr. Hillock or get them a new copy and reattach it to the minutes after this meeting.
that's fine.
And my question was procedurally, we had a motion and a second. We don't have to amend that. We could just let the record reflect that
That discussion was held, yes. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. So
All right.
we made a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second. We had discussion. We had public comment. Call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes for our last meeting, whatever that date was, September 22nd.
With the provision that we just
Yes.
mentioned.
With the provision that we update the minutes with Joe Hillock's comments.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. On to the bills list.
Okay, Dave, now for the bills list.
My favorite.
This is a big one. The October 13th, 2021 bills list. I make a motion that we approve paying our bills totaling $976,275.46. Now, this is much higher than usual because of payment into a pension fund, so that's why this is a much higher number.
So moved.
A second, there was a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Yep. I believe when it comes from John, it comes with a motion, but we have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. I'm sorry.
So, any further discussion from the board? Any questions? Any questions or comments from the public?
But wait a minute, I had one little comment. There was an item on page 10 about WeatherWorks Limited. Is this something new? I know that you had, Mr. Lewis, have communicated to the board members via text messaging when we had these tornadoes and so forth, and it was very useful to have that information. Is that where you got this information from, when you texted to us?
Yeah, that's where that information came from.
Yeah. It would be nice if somehow we could get this information out to the public in the same manner that the Board of Supervisors were notified. Maybe that would be something for the future.
Probably very helpful for Public Works as well, and emergency services.
I'm assuming that's where this information goes to, so, yeah.
Okay, so we motion a second, had done all the procedural things that we need to do. Call a question about approving the bills list for October 13th, 2021. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, finally, I need to make a motion, and I do make a motion, to approve transfer of funds totaling $462,123.84.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
A motion, a second. Any further conversation, comments from the board? Any from the public? Moving right along, all those in favor of John's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Okay, we come to our second round of public comment. Do we have any commenters? Thank you.
Ellen Snyder, once again. I just want to clarify about noxious weeds. They are invasive species that compete with the species that are good for our animals, our insects, our wildlife, our bees. That is what we're trying to make sure that we have, nature provides for, invasive species compete directly with native species for moisture, sunlight, nutrients, and space. Overall plant diversity can be decreased. This affects the wildlife, the bees, the plants, the ants, and every other thing that thrives on our ecosystem. And for that reason, we need to control them.
Thank you.
John DeApril, Newtown Grant, again. Could I ask a question? Where is our chairman, Phil Calabro?
I think you missed when we came in. It's publicly announced that he was still recovering from an illness.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I came in late. I had a homeowners association thing I had to take care of. He's on vacation, the last 3 meetings.
He's ill. He's not sick.
He's ill, I'm sorry.
He's not on vacation. He's
I'm sorry.
ill.
I have a hard time hearing you, Dennis, on the mustache or what. It's a hard time hearing. Okay, he's ill. Because, I was going to bring up that most organizations I belong to, once especially the head of the organization, misses 3 consecutive meetings, he's out. But, sickness will, squash that. I hope he feels better. We certainly miss him. Because, just as long as not being sick because he has to sit next to Johnny Mack, that's good. Speaking of, we see a lot of chatter, a lot of stuff with Johnny Mack's stuff online, and he puts a lot of stuff there. I have the floor. Puts a lot of stuff on there, especially his surveys. And he gets 108 people reply to his survey. There's over 20,000 residents in Newtown. And, some of that 108 don't even live in Newtown. But, and he puts on there about time spent. If you run for election, you get elected and you cut up the person that you beat. You don't want to say, oh, I spent time on this and time on that and time on this. I spend a lot of time with township business, and I'm not even elected and don't intend to run. But, people actually call me on the phone, believe it or not. They call me on the phone. Some people know that. But, they ask me what's going on and stuff, and what's that clown doing up there and all that stuff. But, time spent, you can laugh all you want because you are a clown. Thank you.
We really do need to refrain from personal attacks. All right. Any other public comment? All right, we'll go to old business. We have a couple of items of old business. I have one to add. The first one, though, we have a Planning Commission appointment. We have a resume from Terry Christensen. Did I get that right, Terry? Mr. Christensen? I have reviewed it. I'd like to move that we appoint Mr. Christensen to the Planning Commission. I don't know if there's a second or...
I can second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments or questions from the board? Yes, Ms. Donaldson.
My question is this for the unexpired term of Andrew Davis?
Yes, the one that ends in December.
I wanted to keep it in the record because it screws us up when we do the reorganization.
Right, and subject to reappointment, of course. So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Solicitor, did I see a question?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted, I think that the clarification of the term that the board is considering appointing Mr. Christensen for is reflected in the minutes, and Ms.
Should be reflected in the motion as well?
I believe it should be reflected in the motion, yes.
Okay, I will make that change in my motion. And Mr. Mack, you make your change
It's fine
in a
with
second?
me, yes.
Okay, good, all right. Any discussion from the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Mr. Christensen's appointment to the Planning Commission, all those in favor say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Christensen.
Welcome.
Welcome. You've been attending a lot of meetings as well already, so. All right. Item B is consideration of video goal proposals for hybrid and/or streaming township meetings. We had in our packet some proposals, actually 4 of them. Let me get mine. Do we have any questions or comments, or, and if we have questions about this, Mr. Lewis, would you be available to help answer some of these questions since Mr. Jim is up in the booth?
Yes, I can do my best.
Okay. So we have a proposal one for, let me just kind of go through here real quickly. Proposal number one is for Zoom meetings, and it looks like it's for the equipment and installation and testing of equipment for Zoom meetings. Proposal number two is streaming only, no participation by the public. The Zoom would allow participation from the public. And this second proposal is for equipment, installation and testing as well. I could say the amounts. The amount in the proposal number one is $4,065. The amount of proposal two for the streaming only is $88,645. The proposal three is for YouTube and Facebook Live streaming option, and that is for equipment and test and installation and testing, $4,900. And then finally, the fourth proposal is video services proposal to add Zoom during meetings. This is the staffing, and it's an hourly rate. And depending which scenario you pick, the rate goes accordingly. I'll give you the scenarios real quickly. Scenario number one is for Board of Supervisors meeting and the work session. Scenario number two is just Board of Supervisors meetings. Scenario number three is the planning, in addition to the Board of Supervisors meeting, is also the Planning Commission, and it's a separate rate. And then the last scenario is the zoning and hearing board meetings. So each of those meetings scenarios has a different rate. For the Board of Supervisors meetings and the work sessions, it's $22,050. For just the Board of Supervisors meetings, it's $15,120. That's not including the work sessions. For scenario number three, which is the Planning Commission, it's an additional $15,120. For scenario number four, it's an additional $15,120. So that's what we'll be having
I
in
have
front
some
of us.
comments on this, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I don't know if Mr. Jim has had a chance to convert this graphic so he can put it on the screen, but I think these proposals are inadequate, basically. I'm in favor of having hybrid meetings via Zoom where the people who are participating via Zoom can actually participate in the meeting. In one of his things here, I'm reading this, I mean, it's a totally, you know, I'm a little bit of a technical person, but trying to understand his process here, it's totally ridiculous, if you ask me. I'm sorry to say that. For example, he mentions augmenting existing equipment and what it entails, but there's no details in here. What does he mean by that? There's no mention, for example, of a large screen monitor. If you go to a meeting at Middletown Township, which does hybrid meetings, they have a big screen monitor from the computer that's hooked up to the internet, and anybody can see who's on Zoom right there. You have cameras here which you can zoom in on that monitor. You don't need to connect up all these equipments and do all these procedures. We had Olivia set up Zoom meetings when we were doing this 100% Zoom. We know how to set up a Zoom meeting. We don't need you to set up a Zoom meeting. We could do that. And you only need to aim the camera. I mean, people come in here with exhibits. They have big boards. You aim the camera at it, you could see it. That's what we need. That's all we need. We don't need all this baloney. We don't need a second person up there at $200, $400 an hour. That's totally ridiculous. That's my comment. And, that's all I have to say.
Other comments from the board? I guess my question would be, if we're not going to go, if you're objecting to this proposal in the way it's laid out, we also have a kind of an urgency to get a hybrid meeting started. So are we asking to go, are you asking to go back to the drawing board?
Well, you're going to get something from Mr. Chester Poganowski about doing a similar thing for the Joint Zoning Council. His number was $3,000 to do it for the Joint Zoning Council. I don't see why we have to spend all this money and have extra people up in the magic room up there to start the meeting. And he's talking about, oh, we have to get what the comments are from people down to somebody here. We need to set up some kind of communication. I mean, it's no way to run a hybrid meeting when you can see, just go to Middletown and see how they do it, how other townships do it. It's really, really simple.
I believe the quote of $3,000 was using the equipment that they've already purchased. So some of these proposals have equipment that's needed to be bought.
They already purchased equipment?
In Wrightstown?
Oh,
yes.
in Wrightstown? Okay.
Yes. So,
So I guess we're looking for more proposals, I guess? Mr. Lewis, this is it, right? This is all,
These proposals include equipment and labor to run Zoom meetings for various meetings.
Okay.
Mr. Lewis, can we say that somebody on staff, perhaps the assistant manager, knows how to run a Zoom meeting and can set up a Zoom meeting right here?
We can set up Zoom meetings. The issue is getting it out over, integrating it with the TV and the live.
I just explained to you how you can integrate it. You have a big screen there. You have the camera already up there. Zoom in on the monitor with the people on the Zoom, and then you have it go out to cable TV, which nobody watches anyway. Okay?
My family's at home watching on cable TV.
If the board collectively wants a different proposal, then.
Can I propose that we send somebody to Middletown? I talked to the assistant manager of Middletown, and he told me exactly how they do it there. We are not competitive with other townships.
No, we are not competitive.
If you're talking about the weed ordinance, about being competitive, you should talk about the technology of this township as totally inadequate. Really.
I think Mr. Lewis was going to agree with you.
I absolutely agree.
So we don't need a $20,000, $30,000 solution to do this. And I would ask that we send somebody to Middletown to see exactly how they do it and copy what they do. I'm assuming they run public meetings that meet the requirements of the law the same way we do.
I cannot speak for what Middletown does.
Can we send somebody to talk to the assistant manager?
And find out what they're doing.
Thank you.
So what we have right now is we'll send somebody to Middletown and
we'll
or other, for that matter, other township or two or three to
we'll
find out.
Well, Mr. Mack, I have a question. You said you already spoke with Middletown Township, right?
Yes, I did, and I took photographs and put it on my website. He made an interview hosted by PSATs exactly about how he does this. And anybody is free to look at PSATs at that video. We did a webinar about it, and he'll explain exactly how he did it.
Did you ask how much their costs were when you were speaking with them?
It's the cost of this monitor plus, the Zoom cost, which we're already paying.
Okay.
Of course, you need somebody there to run the Zoom meeting, which I assume we don't need to pay somebody $210 an hour to do. We have people that we've hired who can do that, and we already know we have staff here who can do that perfectly fine.
So we'll take that step. It may delay our, implementation, but we want to do something that's more state-of-the-art than what we got.
Well, we don't want to spend an exorbitant amount of money
we
to
don't.
solve this problem. That's my point.
That's correct. We don't.
Unless you're going to use part of that $1 million we have in the bank from the American Rescue Program.
And that may be a way to fund some of this, if not all of it, but some of it.
But legislation still
Right.
is not down, so we can't spend that money. So, and
It's not, again, not true, because other townships have already spent that money on this equipment. And also, I might mention that Wrightstown mentioned that it uses funds from its Comcast contracts, $60,000, $70,000 a year. It gets from the cable TV, which nobody watches, but we do get 60, 70, I don't know how much money a year.
It's in negotiation right now.
Yeah, they use that money, they earmark that money for communications and to buy all this stuff. We don't. We put that money into the general fund to just spend on whatever we want, but it should be spent on communications.
Mr. Solicitor, I have a question for you. The American Red, those dollars, and I'm sorry, those dollars, we can't spend that until we get direction, correct?
The final United States Department of Treasury regulations governing the use of ARP funds have not yet been finalized, and we have been advised by PSATs to wait until those regulations are finalized to ensure that anything we might spend the money on will actually be a legal transaction expenditure. You don't want to spend something, find out it's not legal, and then, we've got to file a report with the federal government on that.
In another PSAT's webinar, PSAT's legal counsel specifically said that money can be spent on improving communications in the public meeting room. He specifically said that, counsel for PSATs.
I'm not saying it can't be, Mr. Mack. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm not saying it can't be.
PSAS was advising
It
to
has,
wait.
at the time that town hall meeting was held by PSATs, that was one of the things that you were allowed to spend the money on. Again, final regulations have not been promulgated, and it would be a risk for the township to spend money prior to the final regulations coming out.
All right, I didn't suggest that.
Let me finish.
Let's not do it. Let's go to Middletown and use the cheaper way, please.
If you get a majority of the Board of Supervisors who wants to use ARP funds for something that PSAT said you could use it for several months ago, then by all means, go ahead and do that. But my legal advice to the board is not to do that until the regulations are promulgated.
Fine, let's go to Middletown or some other townships like Doylestown, see how they do it, how much money they spent on it,
Mr. Mack,
and perhaps do it that way.
I think we've decided that we would do that. Okay. That is investigate the other townships. All right. I do have a third piece of old business I'd like to add. What's that?
Well, I don't think the board took any action. There's no motion or there was no motion made or any action taken by the board. That's up to the pleasure of the chair.
Yeah, okay. Sure. Just please come up and tell us who you are and where you're from. And I had whispered in my ear that you're part of the technology committee, so.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan Williams. I also a Newtown grantor. Yeah, I'm part of the technology committee.
Mm-hmm.
I do share John's feelings on keeping expenditures low. I'm just wondering if maybe we could use some of our local resources to allow for live meetings. For example, I'm sure the Council Rock School District has AV clubs that would be willing to help us out in this area, volunteer, possibly even Bucks County Community College. Maybe they have students that are looking to do extracurriculars. Maybe one of those extracurriculars could be to, you know, live stream township meetings. I will say, however, though, part of my profession in a previous life was doing live stream meetings and organizing them. They are quite costly. So if you do want to do stuff like YouTube Live, Periscope, Facebook Live, those do require quite technical people, and so the costs that you guys are talking about do kind of seem in line with those types of live meetings. They do also require a lot of coordination, as mentioned. If you're going to have public comments, you need someone there to vet the comments. You also need someone there to relay the comments to people on the board. These are all just sort of procedural things that you're going to need to think about. Some other things, obviously you need someone working the camera. I don't know if anyone, oh, it looks like somebody is up there working. So you have someone doing that already. I'm sure they could probably do that. You obviously have the cameras to do that, so all you would really need to do is just make sure you're patched into the particular live streams. You need to set all that stuff up. So,
if we had a monitor here, for example, on my Macintosh, I can project my screen. If I'm logged into Zoom, I can project it into another monitor. And the sound can be hooked up the same way. So therefore, we can have a monitor out here running the Zoom meeting. Everybody can hear comments made by the people on,
yeah, I mean,
the
that
Zoom.
is certainly, I think your solution is pretty suitable for,
Right.
I mean, if that's,
We
that's
don't
just
want,
what
I
you're
don't think we
looking
want to
do.
do YouTube, Facebook Live, or any of that. We already have experience with Zoom. Many people here have used Zoom. People in the public have used Zoom. A lot of people don't like Facebook. So Zoom, I think, is the way to go.
I think Zoom is a suitable solution. Another issue that I think we're working on, and I've talked to Catherine about it, is actually getting more information on the Board of Supervisors and really on the township website's calendars events. So when you go into an event on the township website, there's really zero information that it gives you other than the time and possibly the place. So if you are doing Zoom meetings or if you're doing these types of initiatives, it would be nice to list, like, what is the actual agenda, as opposed to having to, there's no, like, linking going on. So that's one of the initiatives that the Technology Committee is actually working on, is trying to improve information within the event calendar. But back to the actual meetings itself, again, I think John's solution just requires some coordination. If people are going to be chatting in via Zoom, or if people are going to be speaking via Zoom, you know, you're going to have mute issues, right? I think we've all experienced that in this day and age. You're going to have a lot of issues just with people speaking online that you wouldn't necessarily have in person. Those are just things to think about. I'm not necessarily arguing one way or the other.
And I'm sure there's some solutions to each and every one of them, but you have to
Yeah.
go down the line and check
And I
them all
mean, you
off.
could certainly broadcast on a large screen if you wanted to do that. I think that's kind of like a low-tech issue. I do think, you know, given my generation, if I can say that, I think putting things on YouTube would be actually really great for the township, especially, John, if you're looking to up our technology game. I think live YouTube, Periscope, our generation, and even the generation younger than me, really does you know, utilize those platforms a lot more than traditional media. So And I also think the generation, I think older generations are really engaging with Facebook and Facebook Live. So those would be really great to have if we're looking to get more people watching and more people engaging in local government. So that's just my opinion.
There are some townships that use YouTube, but they don't allow comments. There are the Bucks County Planning, Bucks County Commissioners have Facebook Live. They don't have live comments, okay? So we have experience with Zoom. We know how to prevent people from, what do they call it when they disrupt me? Zoom bomb. We know how to register people for Zoom. We have that all set up. We've done this multiple times when we were running, I don't know if you've seen our Zoom meetings when it was 100% Zoom. We got it down to a science. We know how to do that.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that you want to do is just set your goals. If you want people engaging online, then yeah, Zoom is probably a better way to go. If you just want people to watch, you know, YouTube, or you could really live stream. There's also options where, you know, I'm sure the company, I think I heard it in the proposal. I'm sorry, I didn't actually read the proposal, so I'll have to take a look at it. But, you know, it kind of sounded like they could do multiple live stream platforms, which personally I think that would actually really benefit the township. But like I said, I think there could be some lower cost solutions that would maybe, you know, maybe you could get volunteers to do it as opposed to paying an outside company. But thank you for your time.
Thank you for your expertise. This is not a second round of...
I know. It's to the point here. You got a lot of good ideas. I was going to suggest volunteers. And since John's got all his degrees and stuff like that, I thought he would volunteer for it. Be more time spent on this thing. I brought up many meetings already about Zoom. Okay, when Zoom was the only game in town, the beginning of the pandemic, and I counted the amount of people who was there. I attended the Zoom meetings. Had no audience, no nothing. It was strictly Zoom. And the most people I counted was 18. I don't know if anybody could dispute that, come up with other numbers and stuff like that.
Not true. At one meeting, there were 94 people on Zoom.
94?
Yes.
Really? Really? I don't know why I didn't see that many. Were they in and out? Did they just... They
were there all night, John.
No, never. I've seen people where they bounced in and out.
Could I ask you to be brief now?
Yeah.
And was there anything more you wanted to say?
No, I just said the why. Okay, the point I'm trying to make is why have Zoom meetings at all when the most you ever had was 18? 94, I don't know. Could you verify that and everything?
Yeah,
I'll send you the link. It's on our website.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a couple of meetings where things were controversial and we had that many people.
Yeah, but they're saying that 94, one meeting, 94 people. Where's the other ones? In the teens, correct? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, can we move on to my other bit of old business? I got correspondence today, I think I forwarded it to the board, that the borough would like to resume, is asking us to resume negotiations around the fire services agreement. And I would just like to reaffirm the board's consensus around continuing to negotiate.
I thought we were pretty firm on what we decided last time in terms of the numbers that we wanted, and unless there's a difference of opinion now, and are they acknowledging the monthly invoices and are willing to?
Yes, they are, and I think that has prompted them to come to us to ask to sit down and talk.
Have they sent any dollars here? Okay.
No.
So I'm always happy to have a conversation, but I thought we've already had our conversations, and I would like to see some level of goodwill before we try and open up another discussion. Because and Mr. Mr. Calabro's not here, but I know if he was, and I'm not speaking for him, I won't do that, but I would imagine if I were Phil, that he wouldn't be for this, but I'm not for it because they haven't sent anything to us that would make it seem like they're open to negotiations, other than saying, let's talk about it. We can talk about it forever and just drag it on again for another 6 to 12 months, and that gets us nowhere. So I'd like to, I guess, Mr. Solicitor, I'll ask you, have you heard anything from their solicitor?
Well, yeah, back when this whole, even before we enacted the amendment to the fee schedule to add a fire services fee, they reached out and sent us a draft agreement that I think everybody looked at and dismissed out of hand as completely inadequate. So the answer to the question is yes, we did hear from their solicitor with a proposal, but I don't think this board gave it any serious consideration. We've now heard from the president of Borough Council, who has reached out directly and asked for meetings. I don't know that this board was against continuing to try to reach an agreement that would be satisfactory to both sides. That just hadn't happened yet, and time was going on, so that we felt it was important to take the step of amending the fee schedule to enact this fire services fee and send them an invoice. But it seems to at least have had the desired effect to get their attention and say, hey, we better meet with these guys and come to some kind of agreement because this isn't working. In my book, they owe us 2 months of fire service fees.
Well, that's what I was talking about in terms of some sort of goodwill. They haven't sent anything, and
they haven't sent any money.
Right.
No.
Right. They've reached out and said,
They have reached out.
you know, we'd like to meet and continue our discussions on this.
And I, for one, would be willing to meet with them, see what new proposals they may have.
well,
Can invite another supervisor along.
Well, and during negotiations, do those bills still continue to go monthly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
I've heard that
That
they
would
are
be my
having
preference.
a public forum, maybe tomorrow, to discuss this. I haven't been able to confirm that. I got it somewhere on my watch or on my iPhone that they were going to do this. Can we confirm that they're having some kind of a public forum? I'm sure if we could go there, we could participate in that. But I was under the impression that sending them these invoices was further impetus to get them to come back with a better realistic offer. If they were to pay one of these invoices, that would mean that they accept this, so I don't think they're going to accept what we're invoicing them, but they may have some other ideas.
And that's what I'd like to know, is if they have other ideas.
Well, you two were negotiating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your experience with it was that they were very much not even close to meeting us anywhere in the middle, correct?
Well, it depends on who you ask. For example, Glenn Forsythe wanted to at least have the salary of one full-time firefighter, and they were...
I thought it was two.
Two.
That's not what I recall. Could be. That's what Phil wants too, but I think Glenn was telling us that they didn't even pay for one, and we had discussions where we thought, well, you know, that's closer to what we would like. They came up with something around $128,000. I think one full-time firefighter is around 150, 60. So, you know, we were making some kind of progress, but it got really stalled.
Why did it get stalled?
They started using a formula, and we started using a formula about the percentage of calls. You're never going to win that argument with the percentage of calls. My opinion is that we have to pay firemen whether they're making calls or not. And so it doesn't matter how many calls go into the borough versus the township. It's what we're spending to maintain and to continue to use the full-time firefighters for weekends, for example. So there are other solutions that people have been talking about, like maybe paying volunteer firefighters to work on weekends, for example.
Yeah, but if you're paying volunteer firefighters, that's still, is the borough going to pick that up? I mean, that.
Well, we don't know unless we talk to them. Right?
Exactly. So,
I mean, there's
I think
all kinds of formulas that we've discussed back and forth. I've been maintaining like the number of calls over the last 5 years, the average out, and working from that number. Now, again, that's a percentage, and John doesn't like those, but we tried several different formulas to come up with an agreement. We're not getting close. And I thought a cooling off period or time to think about it was beneficial, but now we're asking to come back. Kyle, I haven't heard from you, if you had anything to contribute.
I'm for keeping the communication going with the borough. The imposing the bill is not looking like it's getting anywhere, so.
Except for maybe it's brought us to this point of them asking again.
Correct.
So
I'd like to see some level of compensation during a negotiation, because this has been going on for, I don't know, longer than I've lived here, apparently. And and you have to remember that piece of it. And, the residents that live in Newtown Township have been carrying most of the bill.
For Newtown Emergency Services, yes.
And that has to stop.
And they're willing. It's just, we've been far apart on what that means.
Well, I'd like to be part of the discussion, and I'd like to make it so that it's very clear in the beginning that this is where we are. We're not going to be belaboring the point for another 6 months. Oh, we'll get back to you and dance around this whole thing. And just come with something realistic that we can all make sense and it's fair.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Fisher and I were negotiating with them, so I don't think you can have 3 supervisors negotiating.
John, I don't think you really were that successful.
Well, I mean, you taking Mr. Fisher's place or you taking my place?
You can take my place.
I think we should wait till Mr. Calabro comes back to see if, I mean, he would probably want to be a part of those discussions.
Well, he should be. Let him, you and him can go.
How about this? How I or someone from the township can reach back out to the president of Borough Council and start arranging a date, and we'll figure out who goes. But maybe, we can have some discussion and decide which 2 of us want to be there. And I would dare say the fire chief should be there.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Forsythe. And maybe someone else from the township staff.
Okay.
All right. Any other old business? Please say no. Any other new business?
Sorry. I do have one item I'd like to discuss on new business, because the Environmental Advisory Council had also talked about LED lighting, which I think I mentioned. And the person from that council, Peter Giles, notified me that he spoke with Frederick Herb, a division manager at Armour & Sons, about LED lighting. I don't know if you know, Armour & Sons repair and replace the lighting in the township. and he was told that Newtown is among the last townships to get started converting, installing LED lights. So I contacted Mr. Herb today, and he said he is working with the DVRPC. I forget what that stands for.
Delaware Valley
Regional Planning Commission.
Right, on the third phase of their funding program, which with pricing to be held until June 2022. Mr. Herb said that 20 townships participated in the first round. 16 are now installing LEDs, and some specific townships he mentioned that ARMA did work for were Middletown, sorry I keep mentioning Middletown, Langhorne Borough, Bristol, Bensalem, Lower Southampton, Morrisville, Falls. So all of our neighbors are getting LED lighting. And he suggested that we call somebody at Keystone Lighting Consultants, I can give you the information, who are now taking more townships into the DVRPC funding program. That person can explain the whole process. Keystone does the whole audit, all the PICO work. You get rebates from PICO. They would arrange the rebates, they would negotiate prices for fixtures, and since they order in bulk, there's a reduced rate. So Mr. Herb from the Armor emphasized that we need to get in touch with Keystone as soon as possible because they're getting townships ready for phase 3 now. So I would ask that the township at least call the person that Mr. Herb recommended to us at Keystone to learn more about the process and what's involved.
Mr. Lewis, have we done this in the past? Have we evaluated this option?
No, I'm not familiar with Keystone. If you can send their information, we'll get in touch with them.
That would be what I'd suggest. Anybody else?
Thank you. Thank you.
No, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. All right, any other new business? There is no need for an executive session.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Great, and with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn without objection.
So moved.
So moved. We are adjourned. Thank you.
From the most trusted name brand in the business, Jacuzzi. A jacuzzi bath system fits in your existing tub space. It's a no-mess installation with an amazing style selection, factory-certified installers, and a limited lifetime warranty. Just dial pound 250 on your mobile device right now and say the keyword remodel for 50% off installations with no interest and no payments for 12 months. Replace that old bathtub with a walk-in shower for a safer bathing experience. If you've lived in your home for over 15 years, it's time to remodel your bathroom. For a virtual or in-home appointment, dial pound 250 now and say the keyword remodel.